This is the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast. I am your host. My name is Kelly. I am here to remind you, however you're listening, wherever you're listening, that as dads, we're just like moms, except we're dads. Ha. So ever since I became a dad, I started to inevitably revisit my history with my own father. And it's a messy history. It's a checkered history. It's kind of a tragic history. But I also know that it's not a history that is unique to myself. And it's unfortunate that so many people in my position have had similar experiences, or that I have had similar experiences with a lot of different people, whichever direction you want to look at it as. It is very unfortunate. One of my earliest memories, if not the earliest memory that I have of my father, was one weekend that he came to visit my mom and my sisters and I when we lived in South America in Venezuela, which is where I was born, and lived there for a significant amount of years. And unannounced, here comes this guy. We had been corresponding with him for some time. And I mean, to take it back to the good old days, we would send him cassette recordings of, or cassette messages, meaning my mom had these cassette tapes that she no longer was using for whatever. And we would record a message or messages on these cassette tapes, and she would mail it over from Venezuela to the U.S. to his address, and he would send it back to us. So for the early part of my life, I guess he only existed as a shadowy figure in my imagination, someone whose voice I heard, but whose face I had no idea what it looked like, shape, color, size, nothing. And so when he showed up to Venezuela that one weekend, it was like a first introduction. I must have been about 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe a little bit older than that, no more than 10 years old, because I came to the U.S. when I was 10. So it definitely had to be sometime around 6, 7, or 8 years old. And, you know, he came, and I remember sitting on his lap, I think. Like I said, everything is kind of foggy, and just kind of, wow, okay, here's this man who's my dad. I don't remember much of the weekend, to be honest with you. I don't remember much of the weekend at all, because it went by like a blur. He came with some stuff, and as soon as he came, it seemed like he left, and that was that. The next time that I remember being with my dad was when I came to the United States, like I just said. And I was 10 years old when I came to the U.S. in 1995. And we lived in Brooklyn, New York, in a small apartment. He was living with who I thought was a roommate. It turned out to be someone that he was romantically involved with. And so that was a really tough thing to deal with, because I was an innocent 10-year-old. My world seemed to be falling apart, trying to figure out, why is it that my father's with another person who is not my mother? And there was no explanation. There was nothing given to me, no anything. So I was left to try to wrestle with that and deal with that as best as a 10-year-old could possibly do. One of the people who were instrumental in my life at that time was my uncle, my father's oldest brother. And he also lived in Brooklyn, New York. And so he took me under his wing and placed me in a setting, his apartment, his household, which was a lot more stable than the setting in which I was living at the time with my dad. And so he would come and pick me up. I would spend weekends, I would spend weeks at a time. I remember one of the coolest memories that I have with my uncle is that his wife and daughter had gone out to visit some family in Haiti, and it was my uncle, my cousin Gertie, who has since passed, and I miss very much. Was like a brother to me, and myself. It was the three of us guys, and we were watching The Exorcist that was on a TV special, like a 3-night TV special or something. Must have been 1995 or sometime in 96. The old Exorcist. And lights off in the apartment, popcorn ready, and here we are, just the three guys watching The Exorcist. And it was such a cool time. This was the first time that I saw from the outside looking in what a father-son relationship should look like, as I was trying to figure out what my relationship with my father was. So my uncle took that place of my father during that time period. And I only lived in Brooklyn for about a year and change once I moved from Venezuela to the United States, because about a year and change after I moved to the U.S., I found myself living in Florida with my uncle and his wife. And here comes another male figure who takes the place of a father figure in that experience. I don't think it's important for me to tell the reasons why I kept moving back and forth. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. At this time, I just don't feel like it's necessary. It won't add anything to add or detract anything from what I'm saying. I'm just trying to focus more on the father figures along my journey and evaluate my experiences with them. And so, in short summary, here comes my father. I finally put a face to the voice that I had been hearing for quite some time as a 6, 7, or 8-year-old in Venezuela. He shows up one weekend and, oh, there he is. Oh, there he goes. That's that. And then next time I see him, I walk into this situation where it's very messy. And then thank goodness my uncle was there to show me what that father-son dynamic and relationship should be like. And then my next uncle, which is from my mom's side, who I ended up living with in Florida, that was trash, like I said. I'm not saying that my uncle is trash. I'm just saying that my time in Florida, living in his household, is a forgettable moment. So that's that. And then coming back to Brooklyn to live with my family, again, this time a completed family. More of the same, kind of. Dad was there. We really never established any type of bond as father-son. Respect him. But I can't point to anything during that time period where, it felt like, there's nothing that I can think about right now that, I don't know, indicates any type of, memorable something or nothing. There's absolutely nothing. That was just the experience. We're all living in the same house, and I guess we got along like family members often get along, but nothing stands out, nothing at all. What does stand out is that during that time, so by this point, I'm already a teenager. At this point, I have more awareness of what's going on. And there's this thing that I was doing that I did not know I was doing at the time, to a certain degree. I'm naturally an observant person. And so I didn't know that I was observing my father's behavior. And I guess because, I'm the only boy in the family. I'm sandwiched between two sisters. I have an older sister who I love dearly and my younger sister who I love dearly. They are they are my crew. If you want to get to me, you got to go through them first. Like they're my crew. So shout out to my sister Ketty. Shout out to my sister Kirby, who are my rock. They are literally my right and left hand, and they're interchangeable. So love them very much. But I'm the only boy in the family. I'm the only male in the family amongst my siblings. So naturally, I'm looking towards what dad is doing just to learn as I'm coming into my own, learning what a man is and how to be a man and all of that good stuff. And there was really nothing there for me to learn from on the positive side of the spectrum. There were a lot of negative things. And I don't mean negative in terms of he was physically abusive, verbally abusive, or anything in that category of negative. But equally as unimpressive is someone who is there, but like I'm having trouble just remembering something good, like a good quality or a good memory or a funny memory or something that, I don't know. So there was a lot of that, just a lot of blah. You know what I mean? Just a lot of blah. Not necessarily dead weight, but just a lot of blah. And maybe it's because my own bias, now as a 35-year-old man, having gone through the things that I've gone through and seeing things the way that I'm seeing it, I am being a bit harsh, but I do try to be fair in my assessment of things. Understanding that when it comes to these type of entanglements, things could get a little murky. So just keep that in mind and take what I'm saying with maybe 2 grains of salt if you want to. But I am recalling my experience as I remember it. Nevertheless, I find myself in college, come out of college, a year after I graduate college, my father decides to leave again. And at this point, I'm a 22-year-old young man, and things were just not happening in my life. And so in a future episode, I explore this a little bit more with one of my guests. Long story short, my history with my father, or I should say the lack of substantial history with my father, really shaped who I am in kind of a weird way. Because as I was saying earlier, looking at the things that he was doing and the things that he was not doing, I was learning for myself what to do and what not to do. Because the example that I saw in front of me, I didn't want to be that example. Although at a point in my life, I had started to be just that. And it was one of the more horrifying realizations that I've come to. But thankfully, with the help of a lot of solid people, a lot of well-intending people, and a really strong support network of friends and family, I was able to overcome a lot of things and change my trajectory from becoming exactly like the very thing that I was trying to not become like into a different person, the person that I am today. So yeah, I'm one of those guys who definitely has daddy issues. And I think everyone has some form of daddy issues, especially everyone who does not have a positive relationship with their dad for many reasons. And I don't want to give the impression that my story is so unfortunate that, oh my gosh, that's not at all what I'm trying to say here. I acknowledge that there are people whose stories is more heartbreaking than mine, more unfortunate than mine, and that have a lot more details, a lot more unfortunate details than my story has. Nevertheless, this is my story. This is a story, a history that is a part of me, shaping me into the person that I continue to evolve into. So because of that lack of a positive history with my own father, my biological father, and also acknowledging the few people, and by few I mean like my uncle, who I spoke about, my uncle from my father's side, it became clear to me as I continued to grow and mature that there was a part of me that was ailing for that type of father-son relationship. And I'm a person that gets in my own head, like many of us do, I believe. And once I get in my own head, it is hard for me to come out of there. It's a rabbit hole that has a bottomless pit. At times, I don't think that I can even explain the extent of how deeply rooted some of these issues are. I also used to internalize a lot of things. And so I internalized so much of this toxic relationship with my father that it took me a very long time to finally begin to, as best as I could, undo the work that had been done. Because I didn't want to be that type of person. And my motives and my reasons for not wanting to be that type of person also changed throughout the course of my life. And I believe will continue to change. Like, I would have different reasons why I don't want to set the same example for my child that my father set for me and for my siblings. And so I knew that there was something missing. And I just didn't know how much I was missing having a father-son relationship with anyone that would be willing to take me on as their son. And here comes this friend that I met from church. And he and his father have a beautiful relationship. And it turns out that this guy has been a father to many as well. Not in the sense that he's out here doing things that he's not supposed to do. What I'm saying is, the person that he is, he's opened his home to be a father figure to a lot of his son's friends and maybe at times even family members whose dads were not so solid. This guy is a solid guy. He is understanding. He is compassionate. He is empathic. He is silly. He is a man-child. He is responsible. He is a hard worker. He is talented. He is wise. He is all of the things that I aspire to be. This man is. And so that was fascinating to me. So naturally, I latched on to him and formed a really close bond with him. He is funny. Have I mentioned how silly he is? I mean, this guy is not afraid to be who he is. Very practical. Just a very approachable person. And so when I started spending time with him and his family, that was the most perfect example of what a father-son relationship should look like. I mean, I hold that as a model for me to achieve. That's how high of a pedestal I have placed the experiences and the example that he continues to give, even to this day. I place these experiences on a very high pedestal as something for me to one day attain. It felt so good to have someone to call on when I needed advice, when I needed somebody to listen to me, at times when I literally needed a shoulder to cry on, and someone who was vested in me just for who I am, just for who I was at the time. He treated me like his own son. We would often hang out on Saturdays, or I would often hang out at his house on Saturdays, and that's where I caught the best naps, ate some of the best food. Just his home became an oasis for me. And there were times when I wouldn't show up on a particular Saturday, and he would call me, "Hey man, where you at? We're waiting for you. We didn't want to start eating until you got here, but you never showed up. What's going on?" That kind of genuine investment in me and my well-being, just making sure that I was constantly okay. And whenever I would call him to ask for counsel, to ask for advice, he was never someone to sugarcoat anything, never someone to pacify me. He always spoke to me in the same manner in which he would speak to his son. I genuinely still feel to this day, there is not a piece of advice that this person would give me that he would not have given to his son had his son been in the same predicament as me, seeking the same type of counsel. It moves me to this day, even now that I'm talking about it, that this guy thinks so highly of me and I'm not even his flesh and blood. And juxtapose that with the fact that I don't even know what my own father thinks of me. So just to give you a sense of how highly esteemed this person is. His name is Frank, but the most important name by which I call him is Pops, because he has become a father to me. He has taken me as his son. He has shown me how to cultivate within me the things that I need to be a better man. And the example that he has set for me, like I said, is an example that I cherish, I value, I often examine. I often find myself asking in my own head, what would Frank do? How would Frank handle this situation? What would Frank say in this instance? As the circumstances are unfolding in front of me and I find myself not knowing what to do, I'm thinking constantly, how would Frank tackle this situation? His fingerprints are all over the things that make me the man that I am today, for the most part. I have also other examples, but the impact that his example has set for me is invaluable. I could spend the next 100 episodes talking about what Frank means to me as a father figure and as a friend, and I will run out of vocabulary to really capture the essence of what that is. So this episode is 100% dedicated to my friend, to my father, to my pops, Franko. Fatherhood is such a huge responsibility I'm learning day by day that at times I think maybe I'm taking this thing a little bit too seriously, if there's even such a thing. That's why, for me, I find value in revisiting certain aspects of my history to better help me understand the phases and the different phases, the phases that I am in now and the different phases that I will be in as my child grows and as my relationship with him evolves. The one thing that I don't want to do, however, is dwell so much in the revision of that history that I start to obsess with it. Because what has become clear to me, and which is something that I want to put out there for you to consider, is that regardless of what my history is or has been with my father, and in my case, as I've just explained to a certain degree, it has not been a good one. Regardless of that fact, I am still 100% in control of the decisions that I make that will influence my relationship with my child now. I can acknowledge what happened in the past, and I can learn from it. That's why I think it's important to revisit my history, oftentimes throughout my journey of fatherhood as it continues to unfold. But that does not mean that I have to be intimidated or scared by it. And it doesn't have to negatively influence the father that I currently am with my son and the father that I will continue to grow into as he grows and as our relationship unfolds. And I think oftentimes as dads, as men, we allow our relationships with our fathers to play out in how we raise our children. And I've seen that happen. I've heard that happen. There are far too many negative examples of that. And I'm sure that there are plenty of positive examples as well. And I want to be another example in the positive column. And my appeal is so that anyone who's listening to this, who may have a crazy, crazy relationship or crazy, crazy history with their dads, maybe still dealing with some of the hurt, some of the disappointment, some of the frustrations, some of the neglect, whatever the case might be from your childhood, still to this day, regardless of how old and mature and accomplished you are. These are things that are a part of you as much as my experiences are a part of me. But that doesn't mean that I have to make the same choices. That doesn't mean that I have to make the same mistakes. Instead, I see those as landmarks to let me know what to avoid and how to better handle a situation. That has been the paradigm shift for me. Whereas before, the fear was that I would be just like my father. Now, that is no longer a fear because I am not him. I am my own person. I am my own individual, complete person. And I owe it to my son to make sure that his time on earth, under my tutelage of his as his father, is one that he will look back on and want to emulate the good things that he's learned from our experience together. And that's something that we can all do. Again, regardless of the history, that is something that we can all do. And that is certainly something that I will continue to strive to do until it's all over. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast. If you haven't done so already, head over to Facebook so you can join our Welcome to Fatherhood Facebook community. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it, on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, and other platforms. If you are listening to it on a platform that allows you to rate it and write a review, please make sure you do so, as that would help increase the popularity of the podcast. I want to express my deepest thank yous from the bottom of my heart to all of you who have been on this journey with me so far. Because of your dedication, this podcast has surpassed over 100 downloads. And I'm excited for this milestone, but I'm even more excited for the future of this project. And so thank you so much for joining me again, for walking alongside me. And I encourage you to share this with your communities and anyone who you think might benefit from this project. Remember that as dads, we're really just like moms, except we're dads. Talk to you next week.